Hey everyone, my name is Roa. Recently, there's been a lot of discussion happening in the competitive community about misogyny and sexism. I thought it was pretty important that we get some women voices, some gender nonconforming voices, some femme voices here to kind of share their experiences around discrimination within this community and their own experiences being women or gender minorities in online spaces. I'm so graciously joined here by Roseofbattle. Rose, could you kind of introduce yourself and to talk a little bit about how people might know you in the Splatoon community?
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Radha, because this is a really, really important topic. I have been streaming Splatoon since about 2018. I've been playing for much longer than that. And since then, I've gotten much more into competitive Splatoon. I am the captain for Malibu Rising. I also do a lot of commentary from things like IPL's Low Ink, Swimmer Sync. I've done a lot of commentary for even things like Riptide and especially the New York City local, like Big Dapple and Gridlock and so on. And yeah, I've been gaming for as long as I can remember, long before Splatoon. And I certainly have some opinions and experiences.
Absolutely. With something as kind of male dominated and as male marketed as gaming is, and it lives in this kind of cultural zeitgeist as this manly man only men thing. What was it like growing up as a girl and as a woman interested in playing video games?
It was interesting because I had very few friends who were girls when I was very, very young in, let's say, elementary school. Most of my friends were boys because they were often the people who played video games. Not that girls didn't play video games when we were young. Dating myself, being back in the 90s, I was a girl playing video games in the 90s, but there were just fewer of us who were more public about it. And while a lot of my male friends I had at the time were really awesome and really cool, there was still just this overwhelming marketing experience from even beyond games that just was trying to market this idea of what being a girl or what a woman was. And it was so restrictive, and I felt like I didn't fit that mold. And it actually led me to questioning my gender a lot as a young child, not having the language for it. I eventually, as I grew up, got older, I actually did realize, no, I actually am a cisgender woman. I just didn't like a lot of the views that were put on me for what I was supposed to like or what I wasn't supposed to like. I was not into dressing up and dolls when I was younger, which is funny now because now I love dressing up in dresses, but I hated it as a child. I just wanted to read comics and play soccer and play video games. I actually played a lot of the original Super Smash Bros. On the Nintendo 64 when I was very, very young, and then put even more time into Melee. And that is really where I first started seeing how male dominated gaming was, especially in competitive spaces.
Hmm. At that kind of young age, it's really easy to kind of lack all the baggage that society later pushes on you about, oh, that's a boy's thing, oh, that's a girl's thing. What was it like to kind of have that introduced to you and to kind of have people tell you, what, oh, you like playing games? That's a boy's thing. Why do you like that?
Yeah, I was always called a tomboy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how frequent that term is used nowadays for young girls and whatnot who I don't fit the traditional view of what being a young girl is. And I always thought it was strange because gender is just a social construct and just stuff that we have made up over time, and we've had very changing views of what being feminine is and what being masculine is over decades, over centuries. It's changed so much, but I guess like the one super consistent thing is that women have always been seen as lesser, at least speaking from like a Western perspective.
Mhm.
I know we've talked privately just about like microaggressions, and I have been fortunate to not experience a lot of like outright, really obvious capital S sexism in the Splatoon sphere. But I have experienced microaggressions in the Splatoon community because we live in a society, and I experience those everywhere from work to just walking out on the street with friends to playing games. And it's a lot of these things that are subtle.
Mm.
It's subtle discrimination. They often feel like it's not something that's worth reporting. It's usually hard to prove that like, oh, this person was absolutely definitively meaning to belittle me. But there are these small actions and remarks that undermine you, and they often go hand in hand in supporting ideas about the world that have always kept white cisgendered men in power. And it's things from in comms in Splatoon, but also say in a work meeting, being consistently talked over. Or you say something and then somebody else restates it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then everybody's like, oh, good point, good point. And you're like, but I just said that.
With
And then there's like one thing I've seen a lot of people talking about right now on Blue Sky is this perceived incompetence, and that a lot of women and femmes and non-binary gender fluid players have to prove that they belong where they've been assigned in a div, or like you have to go even so much farther to prove that you're worthy of being in a plus server. A lot of these things where we already have this culture of results and proving you deserve to be somewhere actually go so much farther for marginalized genders of having to prove your skill, because it's frequently feeling like we are like we're being voted in somewhere, or we're being allowed in, or say you got a job somewhere just because of a relationship you have with a man. Like if you're friends with him or dating him, then the assumption is like, oh, well, that's how you got in. You didn't get in based on your own skill. And going off of that, a lot of like related to both of those points is men not making space, both figuratively, but also literally. Outside of Splatoon, not fun, but one example I think of just living life is that I can think of maybe on just a couple times in my entire life, and I'm 35, just like in my whole life when I have been walking on the street towards someone, and if it is a man or somebody who seems to be read as masculine, almost every time, if I don't step aside for them, they will just walk into me.
Yeah, I think with stuff like this, it's because you were mentioning at the beginning this fact of like it's hard to prove often with things that they're very subtle, and in many cases I think people are capable of perpetrating it without even knowing it, because they grew up in the society and the society like instilled it in them, that even if that they're not consciously aware of how they're making other people feel, that they're playing a part in perpetrating it, and not being conscious of your own biases in that way is continuing to perpetrate a system of oppression.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that applies to everybody. I mean, we're all capable of bigotry, even against ourselves. I've certainly grown up with a lot of internalized misogyny that I've had to work through, and it took a lot of questioning. Okay, well, why do I think that way about that woman? Like, why do I think that she deserved something? And then I had to go back and be like, oh no, that's actually incredibly gross to
Mm-hmm.
assume.
Mm-hmm.
And realizing, oh, that's just been instilled in me from growing up in the world. It's just like there are a lot of things where it's women are so frequently judged on appearances and so frequently blamed for things that are not our fault. And it's things that even women will do to one another. We're all capable of racism. We're all capable of sexism. We're all capable of homophobia. And I think, like you said, one of the biggest things that people can do related to this conversation, but also to just everything every day in your life, is to question why you think a certain way. Because sometimes it's like, okay, well, actually, I've reaffirmed myself that I do agree with this opinion. And that's always good. But it's also really, really good when you learn something about yourself and realize, oh, I actually don't think that maybe that's necessarily correct. And maybe I can start thinking about what I've experienced in life and what's been told to me to make me agree with that assumption. Because a lot of these things they're just assumptions, they're biases, and everybody can learn from that. It takes courage to admit that you're wrong, but it's important for everybody to do.
Absolutely. And then we also, even in these ways that seem so small, of like, oh, like video games are a boys thing, or the tiny little ways that you've been conditioned to view women and femme people differently than men and masc people, that influence your behavior and the harm that that can cause. Because even from your own experience, you talked about like all of these tiny little things, just like oh, only boys play video games. It's a small thing in the grand scheme of the overall society, but it led to you being unsure of your own identity. It can have like lasting impacts on the psyches and the brains of people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always interesting because I always tell people, like, yeah, when I was young, I actually thought I was a boy. And like, it's really cool when some people, do realize, like, oh, actually, yeah, my gender is something else than what I was assigned. In my case, it really was actually just that I was given this very strict idea of what it meant to be a boy and what it meant to be a girl. And I didn't fit either of those. And I was like, well, I have to choose one.
Yeah, right?
And so I guess I'm going to that one.
Yeah, because they define these boxes for you, and it's like, okay, so here's what a boy is, and here are things that boys do, and here's what a girl is, and here's things that girls do, and then you're like, oh, I do boy things, I must be a boy, and they're like, wait, no, you can't do that, wait, no.
Like, wait, that's not what I meant.
Wait, no, wait. I know we made these two options, but you don't actually get to pick. Sorry.
Yeah, it really is like we're trying to enforce you to act a certain way, to be a certain way. And in some ways, as I've gotten older, I've gotten a lot more comfortable being more and more feminine. But when I was growing up, I definitely was sold this idea that femininity meant doing whatever it took to please men around you. It was like being pleasant and kind. You weren't making waves. Just you never wanted to rock the boat.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of girls grow up with that for sure. It doesn't help if you also have like an anxiety disorder, making that even more prevalent for you to feel like you have to do. But in a lot of cases, I've learned that when I have rocked the boat, it has brought a lot of harassment. And so I'm like, yeah, I totally understand why a lot of women do just want to play nice, because when you don't play nice, you often get punished for it.
And I think, especially when we're talking about a competitive gaming community, this idea that femininity and womanhood is incompatible with, as you said, making waves, with pushing yourself, and with success, frankly, it's difficult to reconcile that we want to have women in our competitive community and we want women to be able to succeed in our competitive community, but also we tell girls from a young age, hey, being a girl means being passive and not trying to succeed.
Yeah, and it's so messed up because I've always known so many girls and so many women who have been hugely ambitious, and in some ways we will reward that if it in society is still in line with some larger capitalist patriarchal narrative. But in a lot of cases, if it means really rocking the boat and challenging the status quo, then that gets pushed back on. I mean, when I was growing up, it was even less common for women to prioritize careers over their families. And in certain parts of the world, that's certainly still the case. But I remember being alive sort of during that switch over for it, and how a lot of people I knew had their moms staying home and not working, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but that it was just sort of assumed that that was what women would do. And we still, even now, outside of Splatoon, I know a lot of women my age who are sort of at the stereotypical age for, okay, so you're thinking about having children, will frequently not get promoted at work, or maybe not even hired for a job over a man, because the hiring managers and bosses are worried that she might potentially take off of work for maternity leave.
Mm-hmm. It's especially with like and it's those things again where like you think about them and you think the people engaging with it aren't always necessarily these mustache twirling villains with these ideas of like, oh, but a woman can't hold that job, that's a man's job. It's like they have this pre-built conception of what a woman is and isn't capable of, and then they do things to justify it, and they work backwards, as we're so prone to as humans, to like make up the reason why we're feeling a way after we felt the way, and to build this narrative that oh no, like a woman can't be an executive, what if baby, like like me.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head for like, we will have these base assumptions, and so we'll already have the conclusion and work back from there. And it is so important for us to challenge those already, preconceived conclusions, instead of just automatically assuming they're correct. I've seen a lot of change in the way that women are accepted in gaming spaces. It used to be just that, oh, things like Animal Crossing are girls' games, and there's still some extent to that, but I think we've come a really long way in showing that there are all sorts of different people, and it turns out you don't like a certain game just because of your gender and vice versa. It will change a lot. And I think it's interesting because we look at Splatoon, and I don't want to diminish any of the terrible experiences a lot of women and non-binary people have been talking about that they have experienced. I've mostly been met with microaggressions, mostly from streaming and just being a fairly visible commentator and competitor. Not to take away from any of their very, very awful experiences, but out of the various gaming communities I've been a part of, still think Splatoon is the one that I've always felt the most welcomed in by. And a big part of that is because there are so many non-men here. It's really done a lot. It's difficult when you're the only woman in the room and there's such a higher pressure to win, to not lose, because it feels like if you lose, then you're proving their point that women just aren't as good.
It can feel like you almost need to, like you can't ever make a mistake, because then you feel like you're just giving them more ammunition to fire back at you.
Yeah, it's frustrating. So I never formally did any sort of Smash competitive. That a lot of that formed after I sort of grew out of it, and I feel like I peaked in Smash when I was in middle school, and this was before like we were playing things online, and there was no way my parents were going to let their 13-year-old daughter go out to like locals. so I never got to formally compete. And finally, when I got to college and I would just do fun couch sessions playing with people, but playing with like fairly skilled people in Smash. And I noticed when it was, they were friends of a friend, and when I went over to his apartment, he's like, "Oh yeah, this is Rose. She is pretty good at video games. And yeah, if you wanna join them for Smash, feel free." And so I did, and they all seemed pretty welcoming and excited, like, "Oh wow, a girl, finally a girl who plays video games," which is also kind of its own microaggression. Sometimes
right?
like positive things are like, even if you're meaning to be positive, it's still like, oh, well, now there's this pressure on me.
Yeah, because there's two ways
Like,
to read that. There's like, oh wow, inclusivity, and there's like, ooh, a female.
Yeah, so I'm always like, okay, I will try to give people the benefit of the doubt, but I'm just like, oh, okay, maybe we don't do that. But oh my gosh, their attitudes toward me changed so much when I started consistently beating them. Like, it was no longer welcoming. They got very, very aggressive. And I don't think they were even meaning to exclude me at that point whenever they were getting really heated about me beating them. I don't think they meant to be like, oh, boo, a girl can't beat us. But their reactions made me feel small. And so I just stopped playing Smash with them, and they were the best people I knew in my area who played Smash. So now it's just like, well, I guess I'm just not playing Smash anymore because this doesn't feel fun. And so why would I keep up with this if it's not fun?
Yeah. And I think, again, going back to what we were saying earlier about like the real effects that it can have on people's lives, it creates this almost negative cycle of like women get less opportunities because the environments created for them are hostile. And then that means they try less, which means they put themselves in less opportunities. So it creates this self-perpetuating loop of women being pushed out of spaces, feeling pushed out of spaces, and then not trying again to get into those spaces.
Yeah, because if we also don't do anything to improve the spaces that we already have, you could spend so much effort on trying to be more welcoming and just like onboarding more people. But if people are leaving because they get there and don't feel welcome, then that's a community problem. You can't just bring people in and then when they leave because they think, oh, well, I don't, just like people are being really weird. A lot of men are being really weird to me and I don't want to deal with this. I'm just like, well, yeah, you can't just onboard people and then not do anything to fix the culture that's already there.
Yeah. And I think, like, as you were saying earlier about Splatoon, I think it's in a really interesting spot as kind of a competitive game and a shooter, those are two things that inherently bring up very kind of masculine energy when you think about them. And then the actual like aesthetics and world of Splatoon and the type of people it attracts, it's a very kind of opposite thing in a very like linear single-minded view about it, right? That we have a game in a genre that is so incredibly male dominated. Like if you imagine like the top level of esport in CS:GO or Valorant or whatever, I don't think I've ever watched, not that I've watched much of those communities anyways, but I don't think I've ever seen anyone talk about the top level of those games and mention a woman even once.
It is so rare. So
Yeah.
rare for games outside of Splatoon, especially that are shooters, to have women in top level and also featuring women in top level. It's I think one of the major downsides of esports. I think that's reflective even of physical sports. I side note, I was really into soccer as a kid, and I did not have the skills to like ever actually be a professional soccer player, but for like 2 months I was like, what if I did though? What if I was that good? And I was like obsessed with Mia Hamm and Brandy Chastain back in the day for the women's national team. And then I realized, in addition to me not being that good, there was no support for women's teams. Even that really has not changed
Yeah.
in the last 20 plus years. You had women fighting for equal pay through FIFA even just a few years ago, and it's so reflective. Of course, that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to change, the communities that we're already part of. I've always thought that change starts locally, and it starts with your own community. And even closer than that, it starts with the people in your immediate circle, because they're the ones who are going to most likely have their minds changed by you. You might not change their minds overnight. People are rarely that open to changing their minds, but if I think it's especially out to all the men there. If you have a friend who is saying things, and maybe they're like, these are microaggressions, they're not like straight out slurs or anything like that, but you notice like, okay, this man, if he's maybe like getting friendly with a woman and she puts up a boundary and is like, oh, no, thank you. No, thank you. I would like some space. And he reacts really negatively. Take him aside and be like, hey, like, bro, what's the problem? Because she was just putting herself out there and letting you, honestly being honest with you, and saying, I'm not interested. And all you had to do was respond neutrally. So where is this hostility coming from? And it's with those friendships you have with people, being able to encourage them to change their behavior, or if they really won't change their behavior, to show that there are consequences for the things that they're saying and doing, and telling them, hey, if you're going to keep treating people like that, then I can't be friends with you. Sometimes that is enough to make people really sit down and go, oh, my actions have consequences.
I think especially it's a really interesting social situation where people with the foresight to and the introspection to be able to react well in those situations like you described, where if a woman puts up boundaries and if it goes respected and they say, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable, blah blah blah, and there's respect towards that boundary, people who are respectful of those boundaries are likely to be friends with and spend time with other people who are also respectful of those boundaries. Not always. There's going to be overlap where there's and it's going to be significant enough that it is absolutely worth saying. but it's really upsetting that the people causing the most problems tend to huddle and group up and feed on themselves and not call it out when they see it, because they've been conditioned to perpetuate it. Because to stand up and say, hey, why are you doing that, and why are you putting other people down, why are you not, it's not seen as manly to stand up for other people in that way. It's seen as cowardly and white knighting, and like,
yeah, the white knighting term has been thrown around for so many years, and it's always been so frustrating. I did some games journalism back during when Gamergate first formally started, and like I have so much love for like my male colleagues who did stand up for a lot of us taking a lot of heat, and they got called white knights all the time, with just for having the decency to say, hey, the things you're saying to her are not okay.
Because it's not that they have, they just want to be able to get away with it. Like that's like that. They might have this moral reason in their heads that they've like concocted, that they think they believe, but in reality, from my experience, it always stems from this: we give young boys the expectation that this is okay, and then when that expectation isn't held, when they violate the boundaries of the women and the femme people and the non-binary people around them, and when they're reprimanded for it, they like backtrack and have to come up with this like conspiracy theory thing of like, oh, but it's the woke agenda, they're trying to make women something, I don't know, like they can't just accept that, oh, society taught me something wrong.
Yeah, and there's so much emotional labor a lot of marginalized gendered people have to do when trying to enforce a boundary. One thing I've been really struggling with my whole life, and still like I'm resolving. I was talking to like various people about things, long before this Splatoon conversation just like came up, various other things earlier in my life. People being like, Rose, you gotta be meaner. You gotta be meaner. And I'm like, I am trying. I want to be meaner. Of like that respectful. Yeah, we joke about like, oh, I gotta be mean. But it really is. I often feel like I have to go above and beyond, even when somebody has made me feel uncomfortable, to assure them that I don't think less of them, and be like, oh yeah, I just like, oh, that thing you said, it rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that this is, a mark on your character. Just maybe you want to rethink that in the future. And I have to like do all this softening of my language and up talk and feel non-threatening and non-judgmental. And it takes so much more work and time out of my life to start those conversations when I know I am going to have to do so much work in making somebody feel unthreatened. And this often happens to me speaking with men, more so than with people who are not men. And just having to have that conversation. And it's exhausting, because I've known, especially as I've gotten a little bit more public facing, especially with commentary, and as my team has grown more popular in low-level competitive Splatoon, we've become mainstays at our New York City local, from competing at it for a few years now. We're fairly well known, and my team is entirely made up of women and non-binary femmes. And people, I appreciate like people being fans and coming up and chatting to us and whatnot, but sometimes we do feel uncomfortable. We feel like our time is being taken advantage of, often by men who I don't think are trying to be rude or anything. So I think sometimes when people are like, when men in this conversation the past 24 hours have been like, I love women and women are amazing. And I'm like, I appreciate your energy, but I also need you to look at how you talk to women at lands and whatnot. And, just it's all very difficult because a part of being human is just inevitably making mistakes with how you interact with other people. People like and dislike different things, and are okay with different certain things. But when somebody feels like they have to go out of their way to center your feelings instead of their own, when they're the ones uncomfortable, I feel like that is such a cultural problem.
Absolutely. Like when a man or a mask presenting person is firm in something and they don't soften their language, that's like strength. But when a woman does it, it's like, oh, why are you being difficult?
Like, why are you being so mean?
Yeah, right. Like, it can't just be as simple as saying, in quotes, saying it how it is, as like men or mask presenting people can. It comes with all this extra connotation of like, society can't handle a woman being assertive.
Yeah, it's in both esports and the wider society. We live in a society, indeed.
We live in a society, gang.
We cannot escape. You cannot escape. You are not immune to propaganda.
If you think you're immune to propaganda, you're probably extremely susceptible to it.
Absolutely.
With the community like Splatoon, like we've talked about it being, as gaming communities go, a relatively accepting and relatively queer and diverse and having a large portion of marginalized gender identities, femme voices. It is, as gaming communities go, a pretty inclusive space. But again, we do in fact live in a society. What do you think are kind of some ways in which people can make those changes? We kind of talked already about like calling out stuff when you see it, but in the Splatoon community specifically, what are the next steps? What needs to change? What's actionable right now?
I think a lot of women, non-binary, gender non-conforming folks, especially who are tournament organizers or work in help desk, people who are really in positions of authority and often have to be the bad guys in enforcing certain rules, experience a lot of increased harassment when they are perceived as more feminine. I mean, I can think of some very specific people who have been targets for the last several years because they're the ones willing to do the community work and really take a lot of the brunt of really being the bad guy and saying, hey, you broke these rules and you're banned. You have a ban for a year. You can't play in these. When they're dealing with that and say you as a player are frustrated with a certain call they made in a tournament and you're in help desk, the worst thing you can do is start harassing them over it, even if you're not, pitchforks on social media, just haranguing them over and over in the help desk. I feel like we have such a high percentage of marginalized identities working in the grassroots competitive space for Splatoon. And a lot of us are burning out and getting tired and feeling like we have to leave the space. So be a good player. Be a good player to your fellow players and be a good player to the people who are putting on these events. If you have problems with the way they're running something, be professional about it. reach out to them in DMs and be respectful. Don't just automatically assume the worst.
Yeah, I think that's a really poignant thing where, again, just take that second and just stop and realize my instinct, my reaction to what's happening right now is to do XYZ, and to confront that in yourself and say, okay, but why? Why do I feel like that? Why do I feel like I need to go and do this? And if this person was mask presenting, if they were a man, if they were non-binary, if they were a woman, would I be behaving differently? How does who this person is affect how I'm interacting with them? And you don't have to realize it and change it in an instant, but it starts with recognizing that you do, even if you don't intend to, you do treat people differently based on how you perceive them.
Yeah, and even if you are if you're a man yelling at another man, I've witnessed this at Riptide. Not being a person being yelled at, but watching, one masked person yelling at another masked person on main stage. Even I've seen it both, off main stage and on main stage, just getting very hostile and aggressive and being strangers to one another. I think getting really wrapped up in the competitive atmosphere, but coming from this very very traditionally, stereotypically masculine place where competition is seen as inherently aggressive and hostile in ways that I think are really, really unhealthy and perpetuate a lot of really harmful stereotypes that harm men too as well. Like, I think when we talk about sexism, we also have to acknowledge that we're also trying to put men into a box of how they're supposed to act and behave and think. But when I've witnessed this very hostile behavior that goes far beyond playing the heel or playing up a narrative rivalry, it's made me feel very uncomfortable, even not as the person being yelled at, and even seeing, a man yell at another man. I watch it and I'm like, I actually don't feel safe in this situation right now. Just seeing nobody stand up to this behavior or call it out, because it'll happen to somebody else who's marginalized at some point.
Absolutely. I think that's a really poignant example of, like, it doesn't need to necessarily be like a stereotype or a way in which you treat femme people or people of marginalized gender identities, but it just in how society conditions people, regardless of their identity, to act one way or another, whether it's a man interacting with another man, or a woman interacting with another woman, or a man interacting with a woman. There's all these preconceived notions of the ways in which it's okay that you interact with those people. And if you're not cautious and aware of how your behavior makes not only the people you're directly interacting with, but also how it affects the broader space that you're in, it's doing a disservice to your community.
Yeah, that actually brings me to a point I wanted to bring up, talking about other gaming spaces. I was really into Overwatch when Overwatch 1 initially came out back in 2016. That was actually a game, despite it becoming much more masculine, I felt like when it started, there was all this emphasis on their mascot character being Tracer, who was quite femme, and it being very colorful and cartoony. I wouldn't say to the same extent as Splatoon, but certainly more than like CSGO for sure. And I was like, oh wow, this actually looks like a fun team shooter. I'll actually try it out. And so I actually put a decent amount of time into it for almost a year. And then especially as it went, I guess you would say, more mainstream with the Overwatch League starting, I saw much more of a traditional, stereotypical masculine gamer bent come in and start playing. And that is actually, those are the worst experiences gaming I've ever had. Uh, Not only in how men talked to me the moment I would join the voice chat and say hello, the slurs that were thrown my way when I just said hello, and I was like, okay, I'm leaving voice chat now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also just the culture that men had with one another, frequently calling one another gay for doing something that was a mistake, calling somebody very feminine language if they made mistakes like that. It was just that sort of culture in that community, even when it was just, you know, men interacting, or, you know, people who were perceived to be men, because a lot of us were, there were plenty of women playing, and just people heard from us less and less because we stopped talking in voice chat.
Um, yeah, with how other games and other communities especially interact with um femininity, it's like there's this experience that so many people have of joining voice chats in other communities, and the second that they hear a femme voice, it's like target acquired. It's like it's so
Yeah.
like I'm
It was like
lucky.
automatic.
It is. I'm lucky enough that even as like a genderqueer person, as someone who presents like visually at least quite femme, that I do have a mask sending voice, and people do they pick up on that, and they treat me differently because of it. And when I join a Sendo QVC, I don't get I'm gonna curse. I don't care. They don't give me shit for it. They categorize me in their brain before they even like know my name. They hear my voice, and then they make assumptions based on what they're able to figure out about me, based like on the 2 seconds of just hearing me say hello. And all of it's subconscious.
I actually know a lot of women I know will not play Sendo Q solo. Like,
yeah,
if they're gonna queue up with other, if they're gonna queue up not as a full 4-stack, they're like, okay, but like I'm not gonna queue up alone and play with 3 people I don't know, because we've just had enough bad experiences of, from outright insults to just, you can feel the vibe. Or somebody might not be like outright saying, oh, you're bad because you're a girl, as if like on a playground and we're like 5 years old, but very nuanced microaggressions, like we were talking about earlier, is just, you can feel the energy of how, okay, like I am doing my best and you all suck just as much as I do, and you are definitely giving me the most crap for it.
Yeah. Again, it's that unconsciousness of, if a man were to be making the mistakes that this woman is on my team right now, would I treat them the same way? Why do I treat that differently? And the answer is because since you were like 3 years old and old enough to understand the difference between a man and a woman, society has taught you that one is supposed to do one thing and the other is supposed to do another.
Yeah, we've always just been raised as the male is the default. And that goes along with, you know, when you are the one person who's not the default in this space, then there's so much added pressure on you. There's more eyes on you looking at how you are different. And it's difficult, and a lot of times we don't see each other as just like, oh, this is another human being who likes the same thing that I do, and we can have fun things to talk about, and we can compete together and try our best and just be decent humans to one another. And a lot of people just get caught up in these differences. It's so frustrating. I think we keep coming back to really the number one thing is we've all grown up with these biases, and a huge major thing you can do in your life is to re-examine, why do I think this way? What made me act in that way? And it's good for both positive things, going, okay, like, why did I react? Like, why was I happy about that? And it's also really good for questioning, why was I so heated by that interaction? I mean, in therapy, I've found that very, very helpful for also examining, okay, well, why am I so heated when I lose? So a lot of it was like, I was like, why am I tilting? Uh, like, why does losing feel so bad for me? Like, I feel like I'm not playing to win. I'm playing not to lose. And it sort of got to the idea of, oh, I have just spent so much of my life feeling like I have to prove that I am good at this thing, that it has led to a fear of failure.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think again we talk about this conditioning and how it goes on to affect people, and I think that's a really like powerful example of that. That you can be like unaware of your own cognitive process and how society has categorized you and labeled you based on how you identify, and that affects you, and it affects how you perceive yourself and your actions, and how you fear failure, and you fear trying to push yourself because it's unbecoming, or you like people will see you differently, or oh, women don't do that, or it's so easy to have it seep in because it's everywhere. It's in the very fabric of our entire culture.
It's inescapable. So I'm always like, I just want to really question people when, especially when it's people who are really poking questions, and saying, okay, but like, why do we do this in the competitive scene? Like, why do we do this in Splatoon? You know, why? I can think of one example where we had a conversation, I think a few months ago, about why do we act the way we do about certain people, like of a much higher level skill level in a team, playing in, say, like a group session of a LAN, to absolutely destroying the lower level team as expected, but it feels like they're not taking the game seriously. And I think there can be really nuanced opinions in that sort of discussion. But the person who brought up that discussion, just being like, hey, like, I kind of want to know what people's feelings are about this, got absolutely like shat on online. Not even, and this wasn't even on Twitter. They got a lot of pushback even on Blue Sky for bringing it up. And it's just reminded me of a lot of the people really asking these questions, going, okay, but why do we act this way? And is there anything we can do differently and do better to make people feel more welcome in this space, even while we're, competing and trying to beat one another at this video game? They're often the ones being really demonized for being willing to have these conversations that are going to force us to rethink how we do certain things. I even, back in Splatoon 2, many years ago during Splatoon 2, I made a video about the Girls Duo Cup. For anybody who is not aware, it is a tournament run usually once a year, sometimes as many as 2 times a year, by Dapple Productions, where anybody who identifies as, a woman or femme, or just really won't be uncomfortable playing in something called the Girls Duo Cup, can sign up and play. And they've gotten a lot of heat over the years for people accusing them of discrimination. And I'd released a video about it, and I've gotten heat over that video. I still get YouTube comments on that for people coming in and being like, well, men are just better at video games. And I'm
Oh my
like,
god.
okay, I'm not even going to respond to you, random commenter. I'm just going to block you. because you clearly didn't watch the video.
Mm.
Coincidentally, at the same time, I had released a clip from one of my streams on Twitch where I had been playing in ranked and a stranger squid bagged me. And sort of my reaction to that, where I was rolling my eyes, laughing, and then addressing my chat and being like, guys, like, don't squid bag like people, especially people you don't know. Like, come on. And I got a lot of heat on that over Twitter. Just like a lot of people were clowning on me for really being like, hey guys, I think it's kind of rude to squid bag people. Like, maybe don't do that. Maybe think twice before you do that. And interestingly, the number one insult, the most common insult thrown my way was casual.
Yeah, and you wonder then, like, if it were a man who posted that take, would they get called a casual, or is it because of your outward feminine expression that people see that and say, oh, woman play Animal Crossing, not Splatoon, woman must be casual player, of course you would have that opinion, you're a casual.
Yeah, a lot of it's being treated like you just, oh, you silly girl, you just stand over there and be funny, be pretty, be nice, smile,
be palatable to
people.
me specifically.
yeah I know I've definitely benefited from this somewhat, because I think I come off as a much more like smiley, friendly person, and fairly approachable. And I know plenty of women who are not that, because that's just not their personality. And they could just be having a normal, neutral day, not smiling at somebody, and then somebody will be like, oh, I just think like so-and-so is just like really mean to me and Lan. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure they were just living their life.
That's another thing. When people pay so much attention to how women act and police a lot of the time what is and isn't acceptable, how easy is it to be so comfortable in being so visible and so loud and so unapologetically femme in this community?
Yeah, it is tough. When I've spoken about it with my spouse, I have told him it is kind of like, I feel like I'm often walking on a tightrope, where I am doing everything I can to try to balance being friendly and likable and knowing the sort of like platform that helps give me, for sure, being like seen as this very respectful, kind, nice person, and also trying to balance that with protecting my own space. I had people come up to me during my sets at Riptide and try to talk to me while I was playing, because apparently I'm that approachable. And I was just like, oh, hello? Like, I'm competing right now. And like, you know, now I'm in the zone, so I'm just immediately snapping back like, I'm playing right now. And just like making no attempt to try to be nice at that point. And then after that was over, me, like, my first thought being like, oh God, I hope I didn't make that person hate me. And then I'm always like, why am I like that? That shouldn't matter. I'm always telling people like, hey, you do you, as long as you're not, you know, actually hurting people's feelings or like being mean to them. Like, you should not be living your life obsessed with how people see you. But it's true that a lot of us do this out of our own safety. A lot of times people will, if you let them down gently, they might be less likely to pursue something further, out of hatred and rage, because we have actual documented experiences throughout even, you know, very, very recent history of especially in the US, of women getting shot and killed for turning down men. So I can say certainly as somebody who lives in the US, it's something that's always on my mind when I'm in public spaces. I was wearing a dress for Big Dapple 10 when we all got dressed up, and I was walking back to the subway with my teammates Mercy and Sherbert, and all of us were dressed up. And a random man started hitting on me when we were walking to the subway. And I was just like, oh my gosh, there is no escape.
Yeah. It's especially, it must have been quite a juxtaposition. Not saying that that type of behavior from that random subway man isn't possible to happen within like a LAN setting, but to go from a Splatoon community LAN, which as settings go is a relatively safe space for femme presenting people and marginalized gender people, but to go from that to like the streets of a major city on the same day, it's a big difference.
Yeah. And people always, especially a lot of men will get confused sometimes. They were like, well, I was just trying to pay a compliment. But like I had plenty of women that same day, not at the LAN, when I was just on the train, be like, I love your dress. And I'd be like, oh, thank you. And just like paying compliments like that, or just saying like, oh, hey, I love your outfit, or I love your hair. And then the sort of compliments that I would get from men are much more appearance focused in terms of drawing attention to your body as opposed to the choices you made in an outfit or your hairstyle. And yeah, it was something going from like that Splatoon LAN where like everybody dressed up. There's tons of other women and non-binary people in the room and tons of gender non-conforming people there. And then I was like, oh, okay, well now we're back out in on the streets of New York.
To put yourself out there and to be loud and to be visibly femme, to be visibly marginalized, it's a vulnerability. What advice would you give to people who are afraid to be that vulnerable and who are afraid to put themselves out there because they have this, they've seen what can happen to the femme people in the community or the femme people in the world when they try to platform themselves, when they try and be loud, when they try to make waves? What advice do you give to people who are hesitant to be loud?
You got to find your people. Like, you got to find the people within that community, because every community is made up of so many different subgroups, and really you gotta find yours, or you gotta make yours. I have been so fortunate to have amazing teammates. Even like my previous teammates on Malibu Rising are, original teammates. We've had several people who have been male and have been great, wonderful friends, have just left for life reasons. And I love them, but oh my gosh, do I really love that our team is just all women and non-binary folks. And I have tons of friends outside of our team who are marginalized in some way. And you learn, I think, how to be courageous by being with other people, and you get inspired by seeing them do the same. Because like so my mom does say that I like burst out of the womb being extremely stubborn and loud and annoying. But like I've really, and it is a constant journey for me of like really trying to push myself out of my comfort zone, and to be less concerned with how somebody is going to hypothetically take something. that I say, especially when I'm saying it to protect myself or other people in my space. So it's like, if you're not ready to put yourself out there yet, in a super loud way, that is completely okay. It is a journey, and it is a lifelong journey. And that first step can just be you really thinking about what you want and what would make you more comfortable. And then you pursue that.
Very well said. Rose, this has been a really like amazing discussion to be able to have. I'm very grateful for you to be able to have shared your experience with us. Is there anything extra you'd like to add on? Anything we didn't touch on? Any closing remarks that you'd like to leave people with before we wrap up?
So, as much as we've said it, I want to reiterate, just everybody, you gotta really think about why you think the certain things that you do, and hammer in that introspection. It is a skill that can be built, and it is a skill that we really don't value as much as we should.
Being conscious and aware of your own actions is an absolute cheat code in your life in literally every way.
It is. Start winning by cheating your life. It's legit so helpful.
It really is. And something that I'd like to add is, because I know this was another discussion that was happening around people who came forward and said, hey, in the past, I did things that I now believe to be wrong. And taking accountability and being okay with being wrong. Doing things that are not okay doesn't make you an evil person. There's two ways to be a good person. There's to not mess up, and then there's to realize you messed up. And to realize you messed up and then make the changes and to repair your relationship with yourself and with the people around you. That's the ultimate sign of a good person and the ultimate sign of growth. Who you were doesn't
you don't mess
define
up.
who you are. It's if you never mess up and if you never allow yourself to grow, no one would ever say or do anything. if you never allow yourself to be wrong and to challenge that part of you that always wants to be right, then you're never going to grow and you're never going to adapt and you're never going to be better.
You're a competitive player, you know that you learn by making mistakes.
Right? This is the thing. I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't understand.
I'm always joking that in our when we get coaching, I'm like, oh, these are life lessons. Genuinely.
Oh my god. I could go on an entire hour-long tangent about how the lessons I've learned in comp have set me up for success in the real world. That's my entire life goal. I get people into comp because I think it will fix their lives. And it does.
Yes.
Rose, you've been absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and for sitting here and yapping with me for over an hour. It has been
Thank you for having me.
It's been great. Thank you so much. Is there anywhere you would want to plug? Anyway, it feels weird to be like, hey guys, we just had this really deep conversation. And now go smash like, subscribe, follow me on Patreon. But you're great for doing this. People deserve to be able to find you, find more of your awesome, cool takes. Where can the people find you, Rose?
Oh, thank you. I am over on Twitch, YouTube, Blue Sky, Roseofbattle for all of those things. I will shout out that I am in the beginning stages of working on a charity event that I tend to do at the end of June every year for the last couple of years for the Fred Hutch Cancer Center. So keep an eye out for something in the end of June.
Absolutely. That sounds incredible. Okay. Thank you, Rose, again for taking the time. Thank you at home for taking the time out of your day to listen to us and to yap. I hope it's been insightful for you, and I hope if you enjoyed it that you'll share it around and maybe try and start some dialogue among your own little groups, among your own little communities, and see what we can do as a community. I've been Roa. It's been an absolute joy, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you guys for watching. Peace out. Bye bye.